All right, everybody. Welcome to the Serious Angler Podcast, and welcome back to another Seriously Western segment that is, as always, powered by the folks over at Amped Outdoors. And as always, we are hosted by Idaho's finest, Mr. Adam Deacon, and myself, Bailey Egbrett. Deke, what's going on, homie?
Man, not too much. We are ripping some shows, talking to some West Coast legends. So super pumped for that. But man, just singing the blues, listening to all of your hunting stuff that you keep sending me trail
Literally
cam
blues, the
videos.
blues of hunting.
Yeah, well, like I mean, now I'm just helping friends with tags, which is I'm happy to do. I enjoy that, as well as chasing some fall fishing. So I've been doing some of that. Planning on going and chasing a PB smallmouth before I head to Clear Lake for the Super 60. So
Heck yeah, dude.
looking to kind of wrap up the fishing season with a couple of high notes would be great, and
Yeah.
move into winter. What
Heck yeah,
about you?
man. Obviously we've been grinding, getting the pod churning this fall. But I've figured out my system because I have not I have not fished in. Let's see, it is now 15 days, which is the longest I've gone since last January. So that has all to do with hunting. That is
I was gonna
whitetails are
say
100% to blame.
that is
Uh,
yeah.
it's no bueno. It's no bueno. Because that's 10 months of basically being able to fish at least once every 3 days, which is pretty dang good and very fortunate. Uh, but I figured out what I'm going to do is uh I'm going to fish the weekends when all of the public, because I hunt all public land, and public land on a Saturday and Sunday can just be, especially now that New York's allowed the crossbow all bow season, it's made it worse with so many more hunters are in there now.
Interesting. So they allow it for everybody. You don't have to be like disabled or shoulder stuff.
Everybody, and it used to be, I think, like a week. Now it's all bow season, which
God,
for
that
us is
sucks.
October 1st to November 14th. And then we have multiple different like late season weeks. Yeah, dude, the amount of people I've gotten walked by my cameras all slinging crossbows. I haven't seen a single compound bow on my trail cameras of people walking by this year.
Hmm.
I haven't run into another hunter that's been a compound bow. I've been the only one I've run into. Everyone else has been crossbow. Which, look, I don't. If you're hunting traditionally and just crossbows your means to do it, like that's cool. But it's more of, I mean, bow season. There's definitely the spot and stock aspect you can do. It's a lot harder in the mountainous type of range that I'm in.
Hmm.
You have to very select days that you can do it weather wise, but when you're going out and just walking laps like it's gun season with a crossbow, that I'm not a fan of that personally. But I don't make the rules, but it is what it is. But either way, what I was trying to get at was I'm going to fish on the weekends, so we're going to be chasing some brown fish this weekend. I'm excited for that.
Heck
And
yeah.
I do need to knock some freaking deer down so that I can start just go fishing on the weekdays too, man. Because our days are limited right now, coming up on with winter coming up literally in about like a month or two here, less than that, but
It's coming, dude. It's
yeah,
coming
coming fast.
fast.
Yeah. Well, so dude, we're having you said it, legend John Murray on the show today. This might be a very bold question to ask you, and maybe is unfair to not give you any lead up time to think about it. But
Yeah, now I'm nervous.
would you put John on the Mount Rushmore of West Coast Bassin?
I think so for sure, man. I mean, 2 US Open wins. Like he's won a bunch on the Delta. He's won all over. And I think, you know, it's hard though because it's funny the generations in bass fishing, right? Like you hear these names kind of from older guys talked about, and
Mm-hmm.
like John Murray is absolutely one of them. But then you go and talk to like a 20-year-old that's a hammer right now, fishing in college and probably going to go fish pro, right? Like right out of, and he doesn't and I'm not saying all 20-year-olds don't know who John Murray is, but like
Yeah.
it's a common thread, right? Like it's just generationally, but they sure as heck know who Jacob Wheeler is, or
Mhm.
Skeet Reese maybe is in between there. But like that dude's been doing it for a long time and is so good. So I would put him up there, and I think it's a little bit um maybe lost or run over because he had moved right back to the east. I think guys to some degree maybe miss out on some of the guys that make that full transition. Or, like I wonder how many younger guys, if they're not from the West, for instance, know that Justin Lucas
I
is
was
from the
just
West,
thinking that. Yeah.
right? Like if you are a young guy that's growing up in Tennessee or Alabama or somewhere like that, like they know who Justin Lucas is, but they may not have known that he was originally a Delta hammer, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it's an interesting thing, like the whole fishing transition thing, and I think we get into some good details in today's show about it.
Yeah. I love that perspective because, yeah, I mean, it can, for somebody that isn't out there doing all the content creation that like a Jacob Wheeler's doing, what John Murray having such a successful career. I mean, I can see why a high school kid wouldn't understand that. Oh, John Murray's from the West Coast. I had no
Right.
idea. I thought he was from the East Coast. I mean, it's one of those deals where it's like, what do you mean? Uh, but I think that, yeah, like to your point, that's why these shows are so important because I think understanding our history in bass fishing is just as important as understanding the new techniques coming out, whatever things like that for your bass fishing. I think because I think it's more out as a respect thing. Like if you're going to chase that professional fishing dream, you got to pay your respects to those that laid the foundation of you being able to do that. Or at least try to do your due diligence to understand of who paved the way. So it's love that, and obviously we get some cool stories from John about the some of the heydays in the West Coast, the U.S. Open, things like that. Get some little sneaky sneak out of him too, some cool tips and things that he did in the past and is doing now. So some pretty cool stuff. But anything the folks need to know before we get this sucker rolling?
No, man, tune in and listen to some super interesting ways to catch some fish back in the day, baby.
Heck yeah. I will say before we get John on here, next week's shows for you guys. Obviously, this sucker will be ripping on a Monday, but we have episode with Justin Lucas dropping on Wednesday, and then a cool real biology as well going. That we're gonna be talking some habitat and kind of the importance of all that to how to create basically Titan built bass, like just gigantic fish, and how there may or may not be a Texas state record sitting in the Sherlunker program tanks. Yeah, some really cool stuff.
Oh,
yeah, pretty cool stuff. But we'll get all to that obviously in later episodes. But right now, it's time for Mr. John Murray. All right, folks, we are joined by the one and only Mr. John Murray. John, thanks for taking time out to join us, man. It was awesome to because you were on the docket to get on Seriously Western, being one of the legends of the West, and it just happened that you and I were on Bass After Dark together, which I was very humbled to be on. I didn't deserve to be on a podcast panel with you, but uh, thankful to Ken Duke to connect us and get you on here, man.
Well, I appreciate it. Anytime we can talk fishing, especially Western fishing, I'm all in. I'll do that any day of the week.
Now you're one of the guys that has made the jump to the East Coast. So like, where are you at now? Obviously, because not being on the West Coast, but where are you stationed at?
So about 10 years ago, I moved to a place called Spring City, Tennessee, which is right on the shores of Watts Bar Lake. And I always said if I left Arizona, I want to live on a lake. And so that was my prerogative to be, have the dock, go down, go fish, do all that stuff. And the other thing was just centrally located for travel. I spent, I know Skeets always said I probably put more miles on my truck towing than anybody else in the country because I started in the 80s driving to the East Coast. And so, yeah, the Spring City, the middle part of East Tennessee, I'm pretty well centrally located for Florida, New York, Texas. I can get to all those in a day, which really helps.
That was one of the things I wanted to ask you was being one of the OGs of making the move to the East Coast, like what that was like what kind of reception were you getting from people that were on the East Coast, hearing that you came from the West Coast and vice
well,
versa. What do the people on the West Coast say?
Well, it's been a great move. My son was really young; he was 5. I didn't want to raise him in a city. We were living in Phoenix. My
okay.
wife and I both decided that yeah, we wanted a little country boy. So he truly is. All he does is hunt and fish. The people out here were very accommodating. My wife always said, "Hey, how come you can talk to everybody when you come out here?" Because I always said, because I can talk fishing. All these guys fish, and I can hit that denominator. You know, they don't care where you're from if you fish. It helped that I was from Arizona and not California. Um, you know, California's not got the best reputation to move to some of these states down in the South, but Arizona was fine, and it was a great time. And yeah, I met a lot of great friends, and you know, guys like Wesley Strader is one of the reasons I moved out here. I knew Wesley; he lived in Spring City. It made the transition really easy.
Yeah, definitely helps.
That's really cool. Yeah, I've always, thought about that transition and seen the guys do it. And now thinking of the younger guys, the Lobergs and some of these kids that have made that transition into that central part of the country just from a travel situation, right? To have it all make sense. But that's really cool. I mean, were you the first guy coming from the West to truly make that established move versus doing all the traveling?
You know, Gary Klein was before me, and he moved. Jay Ellis, you know, moved from Arizona when he started fishing Bassmaster, and he moved to Texas. I stayed in Arizona for, you know, 12 to 15 years of Bassmaster tour events and just travel and just flights and leaving boats and having two boats and two trucks and doing all that stuff. So yeah, I probably was one of the stubborn ones. I love Arizona. There's, you know, I have no reason. Everything about Arizona I love is just the travel and some of that stuff. And so I found a new home in Tennessee, and I love it there too.
Yeah, you ain't kidding though about especially with Tennessee. There's a few of those states down the south and southeast where I mean, you just drive down any road, especially country road, and just about dang near every house is gonna have a bass boat or some aluminum rig or something. Just about every house is gonna have it, and that's when like when you drive through that as an angler, you're like, yeah, we're home, we're good,
Yeah,
we'll
you
fit in
know, in
just fine.
Arizona and California, I'd go to the gas stations, and you know, the first question, yeah, I'm sure you guys get it all the time. Hey, what are those things on the back of your boat? Are they, you know, the power pole? They had no idea. Were they
Oh yeah.
rockets? What were they? Out here, they just ask you got the 8 foot blades. You know, they know everything about it. You see a pull in a gas station, there might be two or three other bass boats in it. Whereas out west, you just never saw them. People didn't know what you were doing, why you were there. I mean, there's totally different environment for fishing, West Coast versus you know, Tennessee and Alabama, some of these states.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Deacon, wasn't it? Was it Oregon we were in when you stopped to get gas? When a guy asked like what your poles were. I try to remember what he asked if they were like. I think he said cannon blasters or something like that. He was
Yeah,
asking you what they were.
all the time, man. It's like John just said. It's always a question on what it is, or that. So that's a very accurate statement. We've got obviously a lot less people in the West spread out amongst the states in general, but then when you do, people just don't know what bass boats are, or all the components to them anyway. So I don't remember what they said, but it was something goofy like that.
Yeah.
Well, John, I know, I mean, made a heck of a career when you were in the West as well. I mean, 2 US Opens wins. And I'm just curious because I think did you come back and fish one US Open a couple years ago?
I've fished a few. I've come
Okay.
back a few times. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Got it. How was that experience coming back? Um, and do you see yourself doing that at all in the future?
Well, my history with the U.S. Open is from the very beginning. I fished the third one they ever had. I was in high school, and in the early 80s. And it was 4 days on July on Lake Mead, and you based yourself out of the Tropicana Hotel in Vegas. So that was an hour and a half drive every day for 4 days, starting at
Oof.
6 in the morning, and you had a press conference every night at 7 o'clock. You had to be at, and a partner pairing every night for 4 days. So my original U.S. Open was, you know, you'd hear Rick Clunn and some of these guys talk about the Ironman. It was an Ironman. It was 120 degrees, 115 degrees, a lot of driving. That stupid press conference. If you weren't in the press conference, you had a 1 pound penalty. Gary Klein was leading the U.S. Open and got a flat tire was 10 minutes late and he got a 1 pound penalty, was not leading the US Open anymore. So it was a totally different US Open that is now. I fished one a couple years ago. I got a sweatshirt out. That's not the U.S. Open in my book. That was the difference to me. So I'm one of the old school dudes that's seen it all back then. But basically all there was is U.S. Open out west. That's the only thing anybody recognized. That's the only thing, the first iteration was, it was the biggest tournament in the country. It was bigger than the Bassmaster Classic, bigger than everything. So when it started, that's the lure of the US Open. It was tough. Fishing was horrible. It was, expensive. Everything about it was big. And then the payout was huge. So that was the start of the US Open. And that's why guys like Spencer and these guys really feel like it's a title they want to win. And I can totally I literally bought a house in Boulder City to win the US Open. Um,
No
that's
way.
all my old goal was, so I understand those guys when they talk about that.
That's some dedication right there.
That's such a cool. I love that zone. I'm trying to convince my parents right now to they're interested in moving out of Colorado and going somewhere in Arizona, or we're just warmer climate just in general. And every time I go through Boulder City or I'm headed to Lake Mead, I'm like, this place is sweet. They need to buy here, or somewhere near Havasu. Like they're like, well, we like Phoenix, and then I'm like, no, 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 stay over here, stay in this little zone. There's a lake right here that I like a lot. So, but that is a super neat zone, and I have heard the same thing from every older guy that I talk to about the U.S. Open. It's like the US Open is a grind. It's made to be a grind. And I could not imagine. I mean, I fished a college tournament one time on Mead where we were driving. We had the same deal. We had to drive back into Vegas every evening. And it was like exactly like you said, especially when the lights in the summertime when it's super long. I mean, you have this full day of practice on the water, whatever else, and then you haul an hour back, hour and a half back. I mean, I was toasted, and it was like June or May. It wasn't even close to July, August, like when the original beatdown was. Like that was just it's more about mental toughness and like the what you're gonna be able to accomplish on the water than it is like the fishing. It was crazy.
Yeah, Lake Mead offers a lot of different uh, challenges compared to a lot of places. The long runs. When I lived in Boulder City, the lake was full. I mean, 100% full.
Wow.
So it was double the size, maybe almost triple the size it is now. It's 160, 170 feet low now. It was like heaven as far as you never saw guys. You had plenty of water to fish, but it was a lot of water to cover. So yeah, there's a lot of things about Lake Mead that made it really special. You hear Ricky Clunn talk about it, Gary Klein. There was a lot of things about it that made it really special. It wasn't great fishing, but it was the challenge of the lake. That's what it was.
Do you
Uh,
think the US Open needs to go back to that gauntlet? It needs to be that sort of grind than what it
I,
is
I,
now?
if the U.S. Open were going to be held this year, like it was in 1981, it would be a $10,000 entry fee. It'd be 100 guys, and it would be in the middle of July, 4 days. Um, that's the way it would be. I mean, that would be the closest thing. It'd be that. That's how much $1,000 was back in the early '80s. Was like 10,000 today. But yeah, it'll never go there. It'll never go back. It probably will never go back to Mead because the lake's gotten so low. There's no facilities. The guys can't launch. It's just miserable as far as. I fished an open out there this year and last year, and it was I had a houseboat and you weren't fighting the long tramp. But yeah, the facilities are not there. The casinos don't care if you're there. So everything has changed right now. But yeah, I always say if I won the lottery, I'd have my own. I couldn't call it the U.S. Open, but I'd call it the Ironman or something right in the middle of July, so
Yeah.
you could make through it.
I
I
love
like
that.
it. That's the dream.
Do you think there's 100 guys in tournament fishing right now that would put up 10 grand for an entry fee?
I think there probably would, but they said that you couldn't get 100 guys for the U.S. Open at $1,000. I just remember being in high school and a guy talking about $1,000. I was like, there was no way. I mean, guys were selling sponsorships. They were getting 10 guys to pitch in $100 to get that. Guys had all year to get that $1,000, and it was a big deal. So I would think it'd be the same thing. You'd be selling guys, hey, you throw in 5 grand, I'll give you this much. And I'm sure you would if you had the right situation, the right payout, stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Dude, that's a super Bailey. I like that. I've never thought of that point. But like a super high stakes, right? Like so you think of our traditional entry fees, you go to the pro level and you 5,000 ish, right? An event. But if you have a $10,000 entry fee, I mean, and you pay out, I guess the payout would be right now it's 100, but would that be then a million? Is that the right math?
Yeah, that would be the thing. You'd have to make it so lucrative that, yeah, a guy would say, I could get 50th, 30th place and make, 40 grand or something. You know what I mean? It would have to be that kind of lucrative to do it.
Mhm.
Um, or make the first place price so big that guys would want to, shoot at it. But yeah, I mean, I remember those days when they were going to do the first US Open. They're never going to get 100 guys to pay $1,000, and they got 151 guys the first year. So,
Wow.
who knows what would happen now?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, should it makes you think of like if they can keep that trend going with the Ultimate Angler Championship that you just fished as well. Like
Yeah.
that was what a $500 entry
Well, that's just the membership, right?
membership.
Yeah,
Okay.
just
Well,
membership. No,
was
that
there
that's
entry fee to that
that's
one?
that is the ultimate championship. You had a $500 basically buy-in, and then you're fishing for 500,000. So yeah, you're not going to get that opportunity many times in bass fishing, and hopefully we will again.
Yeah.
But that's not guaranteed. So yeah, I can totally appreciate that, but that's being subsidized by other
Right.
things, and most of these tournaments anymore, the fishermen pay for what they, just they're doing the gambling. No one else is
Right.
throwing in the pot.
That's right. So
Yeah.
so and then I mean what I was blown away about with that was just the pay down just was so significant, right? I mean, second place, Jacob Wall, 130,000, another West Coast transplant, right?
Yeah,
It just the payout was super substantial down the list. So that was neat to see. It was really cool to see that bring everyone together kind of a thing.
that was the best part. Was all the groups of, the BASS guys and the MLF guys and the MPFL guys. There was guys from every league, BFL guys. I mean, everybody were there. So it was a cool event. We didn't get to really interact that much. You sort of saw them at start or finish, but it was a very cool event to bring the sport somewhat together. That's what I felt.
Yeah, I think the industry would be smart to more than are now of pooling together to support these giant events like that event right there, the Ultimate Angler or the US Open, just because the more we support, obviously, especially like for a significant event, winning $500,000 is the more we support it, the more they see the significance to do it again. And so I
Right.
think that, I don't know if they had future plans of doing it multi-year or if they're like trying to decide if they are going to do it next year or not. I think like right now would be the time to make so much hay, like media wise, around that event, so that all the anglers are like, "Hey, let's run it back next year," and then maybe even get some other states on board that try to do that as well. Because I know like the tourism board was involved
Yeah.
for that event, but there's other tourism boards around the country too that have significant fisheries that have that kind of maybe the means to do it. Maybe they don't have the desire, but we could change that desire the more we get behind stuff like this.
Yeah, my understanding is they're still chasing. They're trying to get the funding. They want to have it next year, and I know of 100 guys that came up to me and go, "Man, I'm going to try everything I can to get in that tournament, and it will get twice the participation as far as members." So
Yeah.
yeah, if they could get something together and put it out pretty soon, I think it would be tremendously successful next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things I've been trying to I wanted to reach out and see how there's ways media wise to support it.
Right.
Because I feel like we heard about it early on, like very early on that it was going to happen, that there was this event. And then I felt like you heard nothing until day one.
And then it
And
was like,
Right.
then,
here it is.
yeah, like, oh crap, this event's actually happening.
Yep.
Where from that standpoint, it was hard to like support it from a media standpoint. But like, if it's going to happen again, like we would love to be there and just to make sure that like we're getting some coverage around this thing because we want to keep this thing going throughout the sport. But
Mhm.
definitely cool in that regard, and don't mean to go down that rabbit hole. because definitely want to talk some West Coast with you, man.
Okay.
So to transition from that, going back to making that move out east, what were some of the biggest habits that you developed growing up, in Arizona and fishing out that way that translated for you, coming out east and chasing that pro fishing dream?
Well, the biggest thing that I noticed is the habits that didn't work. So
Mm,
I grew up Western fishing, deep water lakes. You got to have deep water access. You got to have all this stuff. I'd go into the back of a cove at Watts Bar and I'd hit mud and I'd turn around. I went out with some locals and they'd hit the mud. They just lift their trolling motor and keep going, especially in the fall. You learned on these TVA lakes very quickly, nothing's too shallow. So I think that was a big eye opener for me. They really are rivers. TVA, that was what I learned. They're rivers, are not really lakes, and so a lot of the rules that I'd learned out west sort of hurt you because you really shouldn't have that kind of closed mindedness out here. But obviously electronics has changed a lot of the fishing we do anymore. But as far as when I first moved out here, you had to rely on patterns and techniques and areas and stuff like that. And there was definitely I'd fished out here for 20 something years off and on. So I'd had some experience out here, but yeah, when you live out here, you definitely see that it's a different ball game than some of the Western lakes.
a
Yeah,
lot less clear water, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
that too.
They say, "Oh, this is a clear lake." You're like, no, this is not very clear. Let me
Yeah.
show you Mojave. That's clear."
Yeah.
Right, right. Let's
Hold my
go
beer. I'll show you clear water.
let's go look at a smallmouth in 40 feet of water on a rock. Like, I'll show it to
Exactly.
you with my eyeballs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the beauty of the West is that the opportunities you had between Clear Lake and the Delta and Shasta and Havasu and all these different lakes is you've seen a lot of it. You could go to the spot lakes down in Alabama after going to Shasta and go, oh, this feels like home, or Oroville. So I mean, the variety. That's why you see so many guys, the Cody Myers, the Brent Ehlers, the Ski Reese, all those guys from California not maybe make a seamless adjustment out here because they've seen all that in the West Coast. Um, so yeah, that's the beauty of the West Coast is you have the tidal water of the Delta, man, prepares you for pretty much some of my best finishes have always been in tidal waters because I grew up fishing the Delta. So yeah, I mean
Mhm.
there's good proving grounds in the West to come out east though.
Yeah, I feel like Arizona, I mean, granted my limited knowledge of Arizona, but just about it prepares you for Lanier, and that might be the extent of it.
Yeah, yeah,
I
there's
would
a
say
or
like
Douglas.
Shasta.
Douglas in Tennessee looks like Arizona. It doesn't fish like it, but it looks like it. But yeah, there's a few of those highland reservoirs that Arizona sands the cactus. Definitely look a little like.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. Just, you know, someone that spent so much time traveling across the country. It's so unique to me, the desert fisheries. Where would you compare, um, what would be the closest comparison to a Havasu, Mojave outside of Arizona?
The Colorado lakes probably don't have much closeness, just because of the limited amount of fishing and the very, very clear water. But Arizona lakes in general, the flooded brush, you get to Rayburn and you get on
West
a
Texas.
flooded brush thing, you're like, man, this looks just like San Carlos or Alamo where I grew up fishing, and so that's always what I did when I traveled, and I think everybody does. You try to relate it to something you've seen or done. Oh, well, this is
Mm.
what happened then. I remember going to a tournament at West Point Lake, and they had the cockleburs, which cockleburs are all over in Arizona, but I'd never seen them anywhere on the East Coast. And I go, man, if I can find some cockleburs under the water, I'm going to catch them on a spinnerbait, and I did, and it was very good. So, but I mean, it was a plant, not even an underwater plant that related to me in the desert, that related out here to West Point Lake in Alabama. So, yeah, those little things are what you're only sort of trying to relate to.
That
Sure.
I have never even heard of that till you just spoke of its existence just now.
Yeah, now I'm trying to look up what a cocklebur is.
Yeah.
Go down to Roosevelt Lake or Apache or Roosevelt, any of those lakes down in Arizona when they flood, and they got these little briar patches, these little cockleburrs, and you put a little furry dog in there, and they
Oh, I
come
see.
back just covered in these things. And they have them in Alabama. I've fished them in a couple places in Alabama.
Wow.
They're just a noxious little plant that grows water edge, and when the water comes up, fish love to get in them. So cocklebur
Oh,
fishing out in Arizona is a big deal, and it can be in Alabama too.
that's cool.
Interesting. That's so cool.
Speaking of, you brought up Roosevelt. Were you shocked to see a fish that big taken out of there this year?
Well, I'd heard, when I was leaving 10 years ago, I knew they were putting in Florida bass, and the gizzard shad had got in there from the cat fishermen. So it had all the necessities. And the previous state record was 15 or 16 pounds. I was on Roosevelt Lake the day it was caught, and this is like 30, 40 years ago. It was caught on like an April day when we'd had beautiful weather for months, and all of a sudden this giant storm came. It was like the first big storm in the spring.
Oh,
And I told everybody, I'm like, I'm going out for they're going to catch a big one. And a dude set the state record with fishing for crappie. He caught a big old 15 or 16 pounder out of a crappie school. So yeah, I wasn't too surprised, but that time of year, it was August. You just don't
yeah.
usually see those giants coming that time of year. I would like to be at Roosevelt in February or March, and this year the lake's down, and see what exactly gets caught there.
Safe to
That's a
say
good
when the old
point.
John's going to be.
I was
We
gonna
can fish.
say, Bailey, I think we need to make a trip
Yeah.
south. You fly in, we'll head down.
That's the time. I always loved going there that time of year, and especially when the lake's down. See, when the lake's flooded, like it has been the last 3 or 4 years, you got miles of trees that them big ones can get in, and you just can't get to them. When they have to come out of those trees, it gets dry. It's pretty interesting. Some of the structure places and stuff that those fish get to, and yeah, there will be some. If they caught a 16, in August, I would imagine there's going to be some 12 to 17s caught this February.
Whew. I like
Sheesh.
it.
Yeah. Give old Bertrand a call. Tell him to come pick us up from the airport.
There
We're
we go.
coming in.
He's the man. He guides up there all the time. That guy, yeah, he definitely knows Roosevelt as good as any human right now.
Yeah.
No
Well,
doubt.
uh, when you were coming up, man, did you have a mentor, like somebody to kind of help you along and kind of teach you the ropes, things as you were, paving your own path to this career in fishing?
Yeah, there was a guy named Art Price, and he was a tournament fisherman, and he worked at a boat dealership that I always frequented when I was in high school. And unfortunately, he died when I was very young. I was still like 19, or I think I was 20, 21 when he died. But he definitely told me about structure, taught me a lot about structure fishing. There's always somebody there. I think most of these guys have always found somebody that just sort of guides them in the right direction, gets them started as a personal level.
Mhm.
I know. I remember when Aaron, took Tucker Smith under. I'm like, that to get someone like Aaron to see something in you like Tucker Smith did, that shows you exactly what Aaron saw in him, how he's fishing now. So, I mean,
Yeah.
those are what you need. You need need to have to tell you how to fish, but he has to just sort of guide you. Hey, this might look at that. Those are the kind of things you need when you're starting out term fishing, especially 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, and I feel like it's so important regardless, even like fishing aside, but nowadays like ethics, manners on the water, things like that, launching a boat, all that stuff. Like I feel like some of that seems to kind of get a little lost nowadays, depending on where you go. But I think that's more just as important as it is like the on the water, off the water stuff, man.
Yeah, there's a huge difference. I mean, there's no high school programs in Arizona to go fishing. There's one
Oh wow,
junior club in the whole city of Phoenix, but there's no high school teams. There's none of that. I'm in
wow,
Tennessee, which is one of the bigger high school states. A lot of young kids coming up fishing. Arizona has none of that. I can name, when I go to a tournament in Arizona, I know almost everybody still, and I haven't lived
Hmm.
there for 10 years. So it's sort of crazy the amount of the lack of amount of fishermen coming out of those areas, that compared to
Yeah.
what it used to.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I've noticed it too. You know, I mean, I've always known, right? Like in high school, Colorado fishing, right? Like we had like a decent sized club group, whatever, but we always knew it was nothing nearly as big as the east or the central part of the country. But it's a concern, and I think even the guys at BAM are doing a good job of pushing this high school and college stuff out west because I've noticed it fall off even from when I was in college fishing and everything like that. You know, I mean, again, we always knew that there was less, much less in the West, just less people, less angler, bass anglers, and but like there is a dramatic difference, and even now, like there's a couple kids in high school that are serious about it and interested in moving up, and I don't think that's just Arizona. I'm thinking just across Western states in general. It's kind of um, sad to see. So we need to do some thinking on how to make that better.
Right.
Do you guys think that's just tournament anglers? Do you think that's actually just the fishing population in general?
I'd say fishing population in general. You don't see tournaments. Back in when I grew up in the '80s in Arizona, there was 250 boat tournaments all the time. And if they get 100 boat tournament now, they've freaked out. And it's mostly 30 to 60 boats for most of the derbies. There's just not as many tournament guys out there. Still a lot of lakes, still a lot of great fishing. But a lot of guys are doing the sand rails and when you go out in town, it used to be bass boats going to the lake. Now it's all, off-road vehicles and campers and all going all over, maybe to California, wherever. But it's totally different world. You just don't see the amount of fishing tournament or just fishing period that you used to, when I grew up.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've always kind of viewed it like, okay, look, like a state like Idaho, Washington, Oregon, like there's a lot of other fishing than bass fishing and really good world class salmon, steelhead, all sorts of other fishing. The fly fishing, right? Like I'm in Boise. Like the fly fishing in Boise is crazy. These just guys from all over that come to fish some of these rivers. And so um I've always thought of it. It spreads guys out, and then I think to John, to your point, you're just seeing more other outdoor activities that you could do in the West that you can't really do as much in the eastern central parts of the country. So I think you just kind of have people spreading on stuff that they're doing. But I hear the same thing. Like every time I talk to, in again, so I'm 29, but every time I talk to somebody that has been fishing dedicated on the West Coast for a long time, they say the same thing. Like to see a 100 boat tournament now, Shasta this last year, I think there was a 150, 180, something like up there in the high hundreds, which was good. But like they're like, oh, we used to see 250, right? The Columbia River used to have giant tournaments on it, and it's like now we
Yep.
see 80 boats, right? Like, so it's there's just a decline there, and I hope that changes. It seems like there's some positive things. I mean, even in maybe it's less tournament guys, but there seems to be more bass boats around than I thought. Just in the area that I moved to in Idaho, that I don't see as many of them at the tournaments, but I see bass boats around in town and everything else too. So I don't know what that's about. We need to get some more guys out in these tournaments.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, with that, piggybacking off the mentor question. Now, obviously, you've traveled all over the place. Living in Arizona, living in Tennessee. What do you think is the biggest piece of advice that was given to you? Maybe not like something to do with your fishing, but something that helped you maneuver your career.
Well, I think the biggest thing is it's a small industry. You're the guy that fires you 1 year in a company might hire you 5 years later somewhere else. You have to keep your relationships positive. You just can't let things get, you got to, as far as, the tournament aspect of this, some of the, I had a chance years ago uh, to sue FLW and Ranger Boats and make a lot of money. And I had the opportunity to do it. And my lawyer said, you might not want to do that. You might be running a Ranger boat 10 years. And 7 years later, I was running a Ranger boat. So I kept my
Wow.
Wow.
my my relationship's positive, and I kept everything. You just got to realize it's not a huge industry, and you just can't run your way through it. And I think a lot of young guys do, and I think
Mhm.
maybe I did when I first started. You just think, "Oh, I'm so good, I don't need." You're gonna need them someday. Keep your wits about you, and be aware that, yeah, you don't need to be running over anybody, because you might need them another time. So that was the biggest
Yeah,
thing I realized, is just don't burn your bridges. Make sure
love
you
that.
treat everybody as a professional, and treat them as such.
Yeah,
I love
that's
that.
fantastic advice. Holy cow.
Yeah. I mean, even in my short time in the industry, I've seen exactly what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Whether it be myself or and many other folks that were either looking for other jobs at different brands and things like that, has had opportunities arise because they just chose to be good people.
Mhm.
Whereas nowadays it is a lot easier to keep files on and screenshots on what people do and they say negatively on social media. And unfortunately, nowadays it's a lot easier for people to jump on, say something bad and something they're probably going to regret. And they can do it within a minute. And it
Yep.
unfortunately there's a lot of that. There's too much of that nowadays. But I think the people though, like yourself, John, that are keeping it positive, are keeping relationship first, keeping it professionally, I think that good karma is coming around to them. So I think it's good. I love that advice right there because I think there's a lot of people that need to hear that and take that to
Yes.
heart.
Well, I mean, I think the biggest part to me is just that, like, it happens so often. We've seen it just in our couple of years, Bailey, where we're working with this individual at this company, and then now they're with this company, or they went and now are the head of marketing at this company, and we
Hmm.
developed such a good relationship. It's an easy transition to have a conversation, right?
Hmm.
So that's the smallness of the industry is real, right? Like there's it's not as big as you think.
Oh yeah. I mean, just go to the ICAST room when they're having awards, and basically that one little room right there,
There's
rumors
That's
everybody.
it.
spreads fast
Those
in
are the
there.
group. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for dang sure. Yeah, I'm trying to remember who it was I was talking to that described it to me is fishing is this. And for people that are listening, I'm holding my hands up basically like how you'd see, like you pretend like you're talking to your friend and measuring how big your fish was in the air. The fishing is this, and tournament bass fishing is like the 5% sliver of that. We might be the loudest voice, but it is so tiny that everything spreads so dang fast. So it's
Yep.
but that again, that's double-edged sword. Bad news travels fast. Good news is remembered, though. Obviously, being a smaller industry, a lot of people know who a lot of people are, and um, so to your point, John, being a good person, it's like when somebody checks in, as potentially want to work with you, they call somebody who you recently worked with, or like, hey, who's this John guy? Is he good news? Is he bad news? And you
Right.
keep that relationships positive, and you're gonna have a good recommendation coming your way. But
Yep.
yeah, but
So on a less serious note, what is your favorite fishery on the East Coast? I'd love to hear it on, or not the East Coast, but just the rest of the country, and or like the West Coast. Give me the two differences there.
My favorite one on the East Coast now is, like a lot of guys, St. Lawrence Seaway. I fished it first, the river part in 2013 for a Bassmaster Elite, and just fell in love with the place. Big smallmouth, big, you know what it is up there. And my thing is, I've always done pretty well catching big largemouths up there. So I really like that I can do something nobody else is doing, and I can still do okay. And on the West Coast, I mean, there's just so many. I've won like 4 or 5 boats on the California Delta, and that used to be just, before knowledge of what that place was, guys that knew how to fish it were just so far ahead. You understood the tides, you understood, the techniques. Like, I was punching on that place way before anybody ever punched, because I'd gone to Louisiana and learned about punching the hyacinths. And so I'm like, well, there's hyacinths all over the California Delta. Everyone just ran from them because they're so thick. So I mean, there was a lot of techniques that I learned other places that I used, and so the California Delta still has a pretty big if I had to go fishing, I've done well on Clear Lake and Lake Mead. I've probably won more money than anywhere else, but I'd have to put Lake Mead at a full pool. Right now, it doesn't do much for me at a little tiny puddle it is. But yeah, the California Delta is my favorite, probably.
Love that. I'm curious
My
then.
favorite fishery too. That's awesome.
Yep.
The place is
When you were saying that you're punching before anybody even knew what punching was, what was the rod reel line setup looking like for that?
It was amazing. And then to this day, I tell people, we used to punch with dull hooks, big lead weights, and monofilament line. And
Oh
your
my.
boating percentage was pretty slim, compared to now. But same with frog fishing. When I first got into frog fishing, you threw it on monofilament line and you had very, very dull hooks. I mean, you try to touch them up with a file, but with monofilament line and a 40-foot, 50-foot cast, it didn't, it was like sitting on a rubber band. You just couldn't get the bait set. And so I've always sort of said, my frog fishing sort of took a back seat because I used to just cringe because I knew I was going to lose 3 out of every 4. So, but yeah, the punching
Gosh.
bite back then, you didn't have the equipment we had now. We had big enough rods, but we didn't, 25, 30-pound mono. And then, we didn't have Gamakatsu and owner super sharp hooks when we first started. We had old mustads and stuff like that that just were dull. And those big lead weights, those, I mean, they were the size of your pinky, but yeah,
Yeah.
it was quite a different
Yeah.
uh, punching technique back then.
What pound monofilament were you using with that?
I used 25. I had some 40, but 25 to 40, and it was never a amount of the strength. You could not break it, but you couldn't with a stretch. You couldn't
Yeah.
set the hook, And if you
Mm.
if you were flipping punching like D Thomas scissor flipping, you could catch a few. But if you started flipping that thing out there a ways, it was just hard to get that hook set under those mats.
That's
That's so
crazy.
cool.
It
That's
is
so cool to
sick.
think about.
That
Man,
was what. Go ahead, Deke.
I was gonna say the beginning of that though is I think a point that cannot be understated, at least with the Super 60 deal being new. Like the two AOIs, well, they tied an AOI, but with the point system or the tiebreaker, Tyler Madden won it. Ty Manarola took second, and they're both college kids, right? That have spent a lot of time traveling back east and then
Hmm.
made their way back west. The same way that you're saying, hey, I learned this technique actually back east and pushed it west. I've experienced that a little bit on my end too, of like learning to do something on Lake of the Ozarks, and I brought it back to wherever. I've seen little differences there that you take across the country, but it's always talked about west to east, but you don't really hear about it east to west. But Ish is fishing these now. These guys, Roy Hawk, like they've all experienced a lot of that East Coast stuff to where they're like, hey, I know how to do all this stuff. That's maybe I know the body of water. I've known it my entire life. But some of these different techniques that we're doing in other places, bass are bass, and we're figuring out just the similarities all across. It's neat.
Yeah, I made a living, learning techniques in California, like, ripping or jerk baiting. We used to call it ripping back in the day with a big minnow and taking it to Elephant Butte in New Mexico or down in Arizona and just killing them. And I would never say a word to anybody. And I'd get co-anglers and I'd say, man, if you're smart, you will not say a word about this to anybody and use it for your advantage. Split shotting. I took it from California to New Mexico and just killed them. But yeah, back in the day, you didn't share that information. That was
Yeah.
not part of it. When you did classes, I did Bass University for years. You didn't talk about sight fishing. You didn't, people go, can you catch those fish you see? Oh, if they don't bite first cast, no, you can't. I
Wow.
mean, we knew we could. I learned that from guys in the East and took it to the West, So, I mean, yeah, it was all secrets back then. I mean, literally, we knew more than other guys. So that's why we were better. Now, that is not the case. If you learn a new technique in 38 minutes, it's on YouTube somewhere, right?
It's true.
So, yeah,
See, John,
this
this is
is
why
a
anglers
different
have trust
world.
issues.
This is a different world. I know some of the young scopers got some secrets that they don't share and whatever, but it's not like it used to be. There used
Yeah.
to be stuff that nobody knew except a handful of guys.
Well, yeah, and that too, where it's like even outside of social media or podcasts and things like that, like when you guys are on Major League Fishing's live or Bass Live, and
It's right
especially
there.
like the elite showing the exact pin of where you're fishing at on the lake, like they're you can't
It's
even
right
help
there.
it at that point. Like there's nothing you can do. It's either you decide, well, do I want 100 grand or am I going to keep this a secret for a little bit longer?
Right.
That's exactly right. My
Yeah.
tournament at Thousand Islands the other day, or St. Lawrence, I'd got a camera the last day, and I had two guys come up and go, "Man, I can't wait to see how you're catching them big largemouths." Because I caught a 6'7", a 6'3", a 5'10", all largemouths.
Whew.
And I said, I'm not gonna go largemouth fishing on camera. I spent too many years figuring them out. I'm gonna go smallmouth fishing, and I did. And the last 2 hours, we hit a big wave, and the camera got wet. And he went in, and I went and I caught a 6'3" largemouth, on my
No.
own. I had no one in the boat, but I was like, I'm just not showing because the next time there's gonna be 20 guys doing it. So yeah, it's just
That's
it's
awesome.
crazy what happens with that camera.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's there for the world and it's clipped and I mean, I say that as because that's literally what we do. We're guilty of it too. I mean, we're here to spread
Expose it.
information and things like
Right.
that. But yeah, that's part of the game. But yeah, like you said, it's very hard to still be secretive these days. That's for
Yes.
dang sure. It's probably one thing nice for you guys at least, where you don't get the map overlay showing the exact pin of where you're at. That part's pretty nice. But uh man, we're gonna start wrapping this sucker up here in a second. But while we're on the bait conversation, one of the things that I wanted to ask you was if you looked back over your career, from the beginning, if you were able to list like a top three baits that have brought you the most success in a tournament, what would you say those top three were?
It'd probably be I'd have to go with a drop shot first, just because when I got on a drop shotting, I was one of the first guys, I learned to use it. The first big term I won on Toledo Bend, I basically caught him drop shotting. So, guys like, you can't drop shot Toledo Bend. I'm like, you can. And now we know you can because everyone does it. But yeah, drop shot, probably number one. I think the chatterbaits definitely become the jackhammers become one of those lures that it wasn't used my whole career. Obviously, it came about in 2009, 2010, but it's become one of those lures that you catch them on. And then it's got to be a topwater lure, whether it's a whopper plopper or a spook or something. If you can get on that kind of bite, that is a bite that you can win a lot of money on. And it might not be great. It might not be 10 fish a day. It might be 5 or 6, but the top water angle has always been good to me over the years. I won both my US Opens with a lot of top water stuff. So yeah, top water, a lot of different baits, but yeah, those three probably never come off my deck.
Love that. Oh, you said Toledo Bend, then you just said Whopper Plopper. Now all I can think about is that the elite event on Toledo Bend. I think it was Chris Lane. That was
Chris Lane just throwing
on.
it.
Oh my gosh, that was some of the most fun fishing like you could watch on TV. Anyway,
Fun
um,
story. Yeah, I was the first human bass fisherman to get a whopper plopper. I got it at a U.S. Open 2010, somewhere in there. And I'm like, go. We had a ICAST back then in Vegas, and we went right to the tournament. And I thought you twitched it like a prop bait, so I'm twitching. I caught a few fish on it, but I had no clue that you just reeled it in. That just seemed dumb to me, because we had prop baits. But yeah, I was like, man, I wonder what would happen if I'd have just knew how to fish it. I probably would have caught the heck out of them.
yeah.
It's
Oh, that's awesome.
the new bait conversation is, I mean, it's still just wild to me, right? It's still happening today, just at a, like you said, a super, super hard to stay as sneaky. But like, man, I thought about when the first Whopper Plopper first came out, I was like, this thing looks like a toy. Like it
Dumb.
looks goofy,
Yeah.
it's big with this big prop there on the back. And I remember I had just watched the Chris Lane tournament. I was fishing a tournament in Oklahoma, and same deal. Like some guys telling me he's working it like a prop bait or whatever else. And I was catching so many 5-pounders, just winding it. Like, just, I mean, because I watched Chris do it. I was like, sick. I'm going to try it. And it worked.
And it works. Yeah.
It was crazy.
It's crazy. It was too simple. Yeah, it's too simple.
That's for sure. Do you got anything else for John before we let him go here?
No, just really appreciate all the time, and just hearing about the heydays of the West is super cool to me, and of course all the journey through your career. So appreciate you taking the time, certainly.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. It's good to talk with you guys. And like I said, if I get to talk Western fishing, I can do it. That's definitely a love of mine, a passion of mine. And I will be fishing in the West again. I don't know how soon, but I will be again at some point.
Love it. Well, John, because it's the first time we got into the show, we like to leave you with one last question. Every time it's your first time here on the show, and that is, if you could pick any three individuals, they don't have to be in the fishing industry. They could be alive 1,000 years ago. It doesn't matter. Any three people to sit down, have a steak, have a beer, you pick their brain. Who are you gonna pick?
It's easy. My dad, he got me into fishing. Died 28 years ago. I haven't been around him for a lot of years. And then Aaron Martins. I grew up with Aaron Martins. We shared the same birthday.
Oh, that's
We
cool.
we've traveled the country together. I was the first guy he ever traveled back east with. Definitely, Aaron was always a big part of our conversations. And then that last one would be a little tough. But if I had those two in the room, I'd have to bring my son TJ. So those would be the three that I'd have there.
That's awesome, man. Heck
I
yeah.
love it.
I love when the family's brought into the top three. That's how you know you're doing it right.
Yep.
Heck yeah. Well, John, thank you so much for the time, man. And we'll be talking to you real soon.
Thank you.
All right, folks, and that is gonna do it for today's episode with Mr. John Murray. And Deacon, that did not disappoint. Got some
No.
cool stories. That's for dang sure.
Such cool stories, and to hear about, being super sneaky with baits back in the day, the whole frogging and punching with mono. Like, dude, unreal. What these guys had to deal with back in the day. Brutal out there.
You know, it'd be cool. It would be cool to go and replicate that. Like, go try to see what they dealt with. Like go and try and film with
So
that.
fun.
Like, have a setup that's modern versus the OG, and go punch with giant lead weights and monofilament and dull hooks, and just see how
He
fast
kept
we
saying
get.
how dull the hooks were. He's like, we'd sharpen the crap out of those things. Those old mustads are all dull as crap.
I mean, it's true. I feel like that's one of the more overlooked things nowadays because like technology and new fancy baits kind of get all the hype, but like terminal tackle has just like light years different than
That's a good
even
point.
10 years ago.
It's
Yeah.
probably not talked about enough, but like, I mean, these coatings that we're putting on hooks, right? Like the crazy sharpness that they can do with machines to get these things just out of the package. Just, I mean, you don't have to, I don't know about you, but like nowadays, I mean, I've never felt like I had to really lean on them punching. Like you kind of just lean back and you got them, right? Like these
Yeah.
hooks are sharp enough and it's stout as all get out. And it's crazy how sharp it is.
Yeah. You kind of just let the fish hook themselves, basically, especially you kind of let the rod do its thing. But yeah, it's 100% right. I mean, I wish I would have asked them too about like Snell knot and all that stuff, like where they doing that back in the day too with punching and things like that. But we'll have to ask that on the next time we get John on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was neat, man. Any takeaways on your end?
I mean, where to even start? Honestly, I liked hearing about like the 4-day grinder, like him loving the fact that it was like miserable, like enjoying that miserable 4-day press conference, no sleep, 120-degree US Open stuff. Like that, I think shows you the character of some of these OGs, where it's like they might be slowing down a little bit, but they still want to like get the hell after it. I think I respect the hell out of that. Where it's now a lot of guys, they're still grinding, no doubt about it. They're still busting their tail, but they want to make sure they're comfortable. Where it's like there's nothing comfortable about that situation.
No,
Oh,
not at all.
different guard. That's for dang sure. But
Mhm.
there were so many cool ones and some of the different stories he had of the travel, and I thought it was hilarious that he was like, when you move to Tennessee and you just say you bass fish, then you're automatically part of the bunch.
Right. You can get along with anybody. You'll be
That's
fine.
right. Yeah. But folks, appreciate y'all tuning into this one. As always, this segment is powered by the folks at Amped Outdoors. We all of us here at Cirrus Angler, that is our go-to choice for lithium batteries, and really lithium power in general. I use their power station pretty heavy, when I'm traveling and sleeping in the truck for the kayak stuff. But Deke, anything else for the folks before we wrap this sucker up?
Man, not really. We've got a lot of kind of more seriously Western stuff planned related to what's kind of a wrap up on tournament series and looking at next year and what's kind of going on in the West. But overall, man, I'm just excited to wrap up the Western tournament season. Excited for some really big fish at Clear Lake and rocking and rolling from there.
Heck yeah. Folks, appreciate y'all as always for tuning in. Make sure you guys are, if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you guys are listening, obviously Apple and Spotify being the big ones, make sure you guys leave us a rating and review if you do not mind. Helps us out big time. And yeah, with that being said, appreciate y'all. We'll see you on the next one.